You're listening to the Black Eagles podcast.
Ahmet Dursun Sergen aldı. Sergen Bülent yan yana. Sergen Bülent. Sergen. Yanında Tümer var. Tümer'e doğru attı. Kaybetti. Tümer topu aldı. Sergen aldı. Gol! Gol! Sergen attı. Sergen attı. Şampiyonluk geldi. Sergen attı. Şampiyonluk geldi.
İbrahim'in pası. Zuma. Şimdi Ahmet. İkinci gole gidiyor Beşiktaş. Ahmet. Ve gol!
Welcome back, everybody. This is episode 223 of the Black Eagles podcast, and I am your host, Sinan. That's right, live from New York City, where spring finally seems to be upon us. Took long enough, we can say that for sure. Long winter. Of course, as always, I mean that both literally and figuratively as it regards to our favorite club, Beşiktaş, right? It's been a hell of a long season. Good news is after this match, we finally have 7 matches to go. And these 7 are going to be kind of fun because we get to start to see the beginning of something, right? We got a new coach, Valérien Ismaël. We finally got to see him in action for the first time this last weekend, and it was brave of him to sort of rush in and make his debut against the likes of Trabzon on the road. A Trabzon that's just running riot at the top of the table, very clearly set to win it. So you like to see that initiative from a new guy, right? Like, why not go out there and, have a trial by fire, right? But it's the right mentality. He's bringing the right energy. Lots of favorable press, which, I think people are seeing his training tactics and the technology that he's bringing in and the logic and the sort of tactical know-how that he's putting out there. We all like it. It's all good.
Operation is in effect as of right now.
I think we've all wanted to see Beşiktaş sort of move to that 3-back formation for some time. I'm speaking for everyone, but certainly many of us were very eager when Abdullah Avcı came to see what he would do with a 3-back formation, and he folded like a sack of potatoes, right? Like pretty much within the first few weeks he gave up on it, reverted to how Beşiktaş had played under Şenol Güneş, and essentially sacrificed his vision for short-term success. And that guaranteed not only his failure, but his exit. So here we have a new guy, and he's sticking to his guns right out of the gates. And unlike the last time, we'd obviously hope for better results. Now, it's interesting for me to bring that up because who would we be playing? Why? None other than Abdullah Avcı and Trabzon, right? Let's dive in, shall we? So first of all, lineups. And I gotta say, before I even do this, I'm gonna be real super quick, I hope. Because I have a guest today. A guest who is here to tell us all about Valérien Ismaël. And of course, I'd hope to get it going during the break. But I was sort of holding out hope for Khan finding someone for a while. And then, right coming into our match, I started taking the initiative, looking around, found someone who's knowledgeable on, of course, the championship in England, and even knew a bit about his time with Austrian side Lask Linz. He hosts the Hopeless Wanderers podcast. He is English himself. His name is Adam Gipki. And he, again, very knowledgeable. I had him on to talk about what we could expect regarding tactics, formations, all the not formula, what's the word I'm looking for? His ethos, right? His philosophy, there's the word. So, great guest. And so I'm going to try to kind of quickly go through this match as, a bit of a preview, right? This was our first time seeing what Ismaël wants to put out there. But then on top of that, we'll follow that up with a more refined vision of what he wants out there. So, we'll get a sense of what he's building us towards, I hope. Shouts to Adam. We'll hear from him in a moment. But so quickly, let me just review this match. Lineups real quick. No real surprises for us, I don't think. The three all on the back line were Domingos Vida and Wellington. And I guess the good news, perhaps, is that the third was Javi Montero, right? Not Nejip. Although, again, Nejip as a central defender, I think that's kind of become his position, his de facto position. But anyway, let's stay focused. On the wing backs, again, no real surprises. We had Ridvan Yilmaz and Valentin Rosier. And then so we played sort of a 5-4-1, to be 100% honest. It could turn into a 3-4-3 quickly with our wings moving more forward and our wing backs stepping forward. So in that sense, we have that flexibility, which is what you want out of a five-man back line or three central defenders back line. On the midfield, we had John Bozdogan and Joseph de Souza as our sort of central midfielders, and then Rashid Ghazal and Alex Teixeira on the flanks, on the wings, with Michy Batshuayi up front. So, probably no real surprises. I mean, you could probably make the argument that seeing John Bozdogan start over the likes of, Atiba or a number of other guys, right? Nejib, Mehmet Topal or whatever. It's good. It's good to see the kid in there for sure. And I guess seeing Alex Teixeira on the left side, finally, for some of us, that's what we've been I had assumed he'd step in there, especially once Nkudu went down to injury. For me, that was the logical step. So it was good to see our new manager thinking along the same lines. At least for me it was. So let's dive in. Again, we gotta move quick. Gotta move to the interview. So the first real action actually was Alex Teixeira on that left side. A great job of cutting out a sort of lazy bit of build-up from Trabzon. Steps in, cuts out a pass, takes a nice little run down the side, and then sort of doesn't make the right decision. Michy Batshuayi is a bit set back, so I think if he pulls back across, we have probably an easy goal, or at least, who knows what Michy Batshuayi does with it, but an easy opportunity for a goal. And then, I don't know, he instead it looks like he chooses to cross, but he crosses far, to get behind the defense, and Michy Batshuayi didn't make the run, so whatever. But good intent, no doubt about it. And in the 16th minute, they sort of hit us back, and we had most of the ball and a couple half chances. Joseph sending a volley high, but so here it would be Domingos Vida clearing the ball poorly with his head into the path of our opposition, whose lineup I didn't go over, by the way. I guess I'll real quickly just mention Uğurcan, of course, in the back line, and their goal, Hüseyin Türkmen, 24-year-old Turk on the back line, next to Stefano Denswil, 28-year-old Dutch defender, Timoteusz Puchask, 23-year-old Polish left back, opposite Dorukhan Tokus, 25-year-old Turk on the right side, Manolis Siopis, 27-year-old Greek central defensive midfielder, set behind Anastasios Bakasetas, 28-year-old Greek attacking midfielder, who was next to Abdul Kadir Omur, 22-year-old Turkish Phenom, who's oft injured, unfortunately. Anthony Nwakayeme, 33-year-old Nigerian left wing, opposite, of course, Edin Viska, 32-year-old Bosnian right winger. All of them set behind Giannini, 31-year-old Cape Verdean striker. And so I mentioned this because Vida heads it into the path of, I believe, I'm not sure who it was initially, but they sort of tapped it on nicely into the path of Edin Visca, who sends in a perfect cross into the path of Giannini. And it looks like they have an easy goal. And what happens is Valentin Rosier keeps him on side, realizes too late, tries to run and get him off. Instead, just gives him an open opportunity on goal, one-on-one. And luckily, Giannini is off balance. Can't quite control the ball, falls over, and we are lucky, very lucky at this point. 27th minute. Apologies for the out of order, lineups and whatnot, but we're rolling with it. 27th minute, Rachid Ghezal is running upfield alongside Michy Batshuayi with, I think, 3 defenders striking back. And Ghezal with the wonder pass on the ground between 2 of those defenders with a little bit of curve on it. It was a beautiful pass into the path of Michy Batshuayi. Michy Batshuayi's first touch is wonky, poor. He runs onto it still, but with just not quite enough time to do anything with it. Puchaj, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but he had a pretty decent game, except in this case, it looks like he may have committed a penalty, sort of a bad tackle. I thought at first maybe he had gotten the ball first, but it looks like maybe he didn't, and he definitely got enough leg that you have to question if it would have been a penalty regardless. In the end, it's looked at in the VAR booth, not reviewed further. It's not a penalty, we move on. Supposedly there's a foul in the build-up to the penalty itself, so I guess we roll with it. Where are we here? 40th minute would be right after John Bosdoin gets himself a yellow card. A free kick that's sort of deep set. Rachid Ghezal on the right side sends it up, perfectly placed onto the head of Domagoj Vida, and just not quite enough oomph, not quite enough juice on it. Urjan gets to it, knocks it out of bounds. Probably should have caught it, but whatever. And still, so it's 0-0. 44th minute. And I only saw this in the replay. I didn't even notice this in action live. Maybe I had turned my head for a moment, but right before the half, Ridvan Yilmaz, so Alex Teixeira does well to bring the ball down, send it out wide to Ridvan Yilmaz, and they all sort of run up for a cross right before the halftime whistle. The ball, first of all, Alex Teixeira looks like he might have been brought down in the penalty box. I didn't get a close replay. Nobody seems to notice it, so whatever. But the ball still dropped right into the sort of belly of Rachid Ghezal, and you think he'll just have that one nice little touch and just send it into the back of the net. Instead, it takes an awkward bounce off of his belly and kind of rolls forward. Still, perhaps there's a chance for Michy Batshuayi to get onto the end of it and put it in the back of the net. Nope, doesn't get there fast enough. This time it's not his fault. It's just, I think, when he's not scoring, we have a tendency to I bet people were blaming him for not getting on the end of it, even though it wasn't his fault. Anyway, that would be it for the half. Still 0-0. One yellow card to John Bosdoin. Should have probably been 2 or 3 for Trabzon at this point. Terrible refereeing. But we roll. 46th minute. First of all, at the half, Andreas Cornelius enters for Anthony Nwakaeme because Wellington had pocketed Nwakaeme, which Nwakaeme can cause problems for almost any side. He was a bit of a problem for Rosier defensively, but Wellington just key tackles, brave, standing his ground, had nothing. Nwakaeme had nothing on him. So Cornelius would have a go at it. First chance in the second half, it would actually end up being a pretty decent chance that would drop to Batshuayi. He'd take a tough shot at an angle. Urjan saves it, it sputters, a little backspin, so it's not quite going outside. A Trabzon defender gets to the other end of it to try to keep it inbound, ends up passing it right to Uğurcan. Quite dumb, honestly. Quite a stupid play on their part. But the result is a weird free kick, an indirect right in the box. They set up the wall incorrectly, which is unfortunate. Might have scored on this otherwise, but it is what it is. And of course, right? To this point, I have mentioned 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 5 major chances for Beşiktaş here so far. And only 1 to Trabzon. And of course, so on the very second decent chance for them, it's a long ball from Hüseyin Türkmen in the back. Domagoj Vida was soft stuff here in his clash with Andreas Cornelius. The ball kind of bounces further into the path of Cornelius, who runs onto it. Vida, instead of further attacking and trying to get him off the ball, runs towards the goal to sort of like secure the back line because Ersin is for some reason stuck out in no man's land. So 2 errors by Domagoj Vida because I think he could have been more aggressive. 1 from Ersin in terms of his positioning, just getting caught in no man's land. Cornelius does the very smart thing and lobs him. Does it perfectly, frankly. And it's a goal. 1-0. And we're hating our lives, right? I'm going to keep it real. I am so pissed at this point because we have played such a good game. So we've been so dominant. We've had so many opportunities that haven't really amounted to actual opportunities, right? Just not getting that shot off, right? Hitting a defender, getting tackled poorly. But here they are with basically their first actual attempt on goal because their other opportunity to Giannini, he was just sort of like fell over. And they score. No justice, but it is what it is. The next real opportunity, 66th minute, Rashid Ghazal clearly brought down. They spent way too much time looking at it, as they always do. Lots of complaining from Trabzon, which was just bizarre because it was one of the most obvious penalties that any of us have seen in a long time. Stupid tackle from Abdülkadir Ömür. What happens? Michy Batshuayi steps up to take the penalty and sends it into the bar. He does send Uğurcan the wrong way, but he also smacks it into the bar. It goes out. No goal. We get a corner kick off of it, but still, absolute failure by Michy Batshuayi. He's pissed. Subs are made. For Trabzon, Berat Özdemir comes on for Abdülkadir Ömür, who, dumb penalty on his part, no doubt. Kyle Larin on for Alex Teixeira, who had a few decent moments, but not, overall kind of underwhelmed, as he has. Kenan Karaman came on for Michy Batshuayi. Michy Batshuayi is pissed that he missed the penalty kick. He kicks the water cooler. You like to see that, to be honest. He should be pissed. That was disappointing for all of us. And then, pretty much right out of the gates, up the right side, we go right on the counter. They had gotten a run themselves first. We sort of snap back on the counter. Rashid Ghazal plays Valentin Rosier on perfectly. Again, just absolutely delightfully weighted low pass into the path of Valentin Rosier, who one touch slams it. Fantastic shot. Great technique. This system could really suit these two. Ghazal and Valentin Rosier seem to be primed to benefit from this new coach. And bam, a goal. Our guest Adam will mention how the system is suited to wingbacks. And so Rosier looks poised to benefit, no doubt. And it's 1-1. Should be 2-1. Certainly, right, with the penalty, but whatever, we're rolling. But what I will say is that there was a fantastic celebration as well with Valérien Ismaël. Very enthusiastic. Nothing gets me more amped than someone who looks super angry when they're happy. And he has that yes, yeah, you love to see it. Getting real, getting going. Apologies for New York sounds. The city is going crazy. This is day 2. Yesterday, I interviewed our guest, Adam, And we had a ton of these sounds. And hopefully you won't hear many of them because I'm going to just remove that part of the recording, my end of it. But here we are again. I'll cut this out. It's probably worth mentioning that during the interview, Adam was like, "Oh, it's great. It's like an authentic experience." And then like the sounds carried on throughout the entire interview. And it's because like there was a fire sort of diagonally but across the street at one of my favorite Mexican restaurants. I hope it's okay now that I think about it. But yeah, New York throwing up the sounds. What are you gonna do? So where on earth was I? That's right. So we'd hit them back on the right after they'd scored. I mean not right, just 10, 15 minutes after, but right after we'd missed the penalty, I guess is what it was. Anyway, 74th minute, Miralem Pjanic enters for John Bozdoğan. Good stuff there. Just to see Pjanic healthy enough to play, I suppose. Kenan Karaman with a yellow card in the 75th minute, 79th minute. So Kyle Larin had just entered in the 70th. Kyle Larin is being just yanked on and pulled on by Siopis. I don't know what he's doing. Just trying to stop play, I guess, but quite aggressively. Kyle Larin's pissed. There's a bit of a tussle, and then it kind of looks like Siopis is coming around to slap him, but he wasn't. I think maybe he was just trying to catch his balance. But so Larin reacts and slaps back. A very gentle slap, honestly. More like, hey, like kind of smacking him away. But yeah, sure enough, red card. He's done for. Giannini gets a yellow card. Bakasetas gets a yellow card. Siopis gets a yellow card. 85th minute, subs again. Marek Hamsik comes in for Trabzon on his recovery tour. For Bakasetas, Yusuf Erdoğan enters for Giannini and Jean Kouassi for Edin Visca. 90th minute, Atiba Hutchinson enters for Rashid Ghezal. Umut Merash for Ridvan Yilmaz. Atiba gets a yellow card in the first minute of extra time. So tidy work from him there. And then 92nd minute, last real chance, a free kick from Hamsik drops to, I think it was either Dodurkan's head or maybe Cornelius. I couldn't quite tell, to be honest. But it bangs off the post. Crossbar, we're lucky, perhaps. Although, again, it's a game that Beşiktaş dominated, objectively speaking. XG, I don't have the numbers, but apparently we dominated in that sense. We didn't dominate possession. They had 52%, our 48. But we had 15 shots to their 8, 3 on target to their 2. And again, all the real big opportunities that I mentioned, the vast majority of them fell to Beşiktaş. 2 big chances missed for Beşiktaş, none for them. 3 big chances for us, 1 for them. So they were basically 1 for 1. They had more of the ball, so they completed more passes, 325 to our 286. They completed them at a 76% rate to our 74. They committed 16 fouls. We committed 18. They were offsides 4 times, we were offsides once. We had 4 corners to their 3. Again, 15 shots to their 8. We had 6 shots blocked by defenders. We each hit the woodwork once. We had 11 shots inside the box and just one goal to speak for it. Individuals, I'm going to probably go ahead and give my man of the match to Rashid Ghezal. Outstanding performance. Lots of just the kind of passes that leave your jaw on the floor. Siopis was the highest rated player, ironically. He also makes my hit list. That's right, folks. We have an official hit list entry. Manolis Siopis. I would have smacked him, frankly. I don't know what he was doing. It was dirty play. It's not how you stop play if you want if you're trying to get something accomplished. There wasn't an injured player that needed to come off or anything like that either, so I'm not really sure why. Yeah, I mean, just bad play all around. clearly, I think, in a way, he was almost trying to egg on Kyle Larin with, not just yanking on him to pull him down, but also his quick reaction like he was going to get into his face and start a fight when he'd obviously done something wrong. Hit list material. You're on the hit list, kid. We hate you. But somehow he's got the highest ratings in this match. Next up, Gezal, who's my man of the match. I only give him the best judge players. Valentin Rosier. Up next, Dorkan Tokuz, Wellington, Joseph, Hussein Turkmen, Domagoj Vida. Turkmen had the assist. Puchaz, Stefano Densville, Montero, Cornelius, Giannini, and that's it. Bakasetas just under that 7 mark with a 6.98. But so yeah, quite a number of players rated pretty highly in this match. Like Montero, Vida, Joseph, and Wellington, right? The fact that so many of our highly rated players are defenders or sort of defensive oriented says a lot to how we played, I suppose. There's lots of passing around. And the 3-man back line really suited all 3 of our defenders. So, certainly a positive. Now, that's it. I've done my stats. You've gotten your taste for what we looked like in game number 1 with Valérien Ismaël. Now, let me hand the mic to our guest, Adam Gipki of the Hopeless Wanderers podcast, to tell us a little bit more about what we can expect. So with me today, as I've already mentioned in my build-up in the podcast, Adam Gipki of the Hopeless Wanderer podcast, live from the UK, from Wickham. Is that accurate?
Yeah, close enough. I'm in a place called Aylesbury, but yeah, not too far from Wickham. It's about half an hour's drive, so yeah, quite close by.
Nice. And so, I've got Adam on to talk about, obviously, the big news for our club, which is the hiring of Valérien Ismaël, which is just a fantastic name, by the way. It's like out of Game of Thrones.
Exotic, isn't it? Exotic ball manager.
But so, yeah, you happen to know quite a bit about the manager. And in fact, from our conversation, it seems like know even some of the background, some of the smaller clubs and leagues he's been with. So I guess real quickly, let me just hand over the mic to you. And what is your impression of the manager? Generally speaking, is he underrated, overrated, misunderstood, what about his history kind of stands out for you? What are you, et cetera, et cetera.
I think you've kind of summed it up. There's a kind of mixture of unknown. Some people rate him, some people don't. And I think what I'll do for your listeners' benefit is take you back to his playing style. So when I first got to know Valérien Ismaël, which was when he was a defender for Crystal Palace. At the time, he was a record signing for them. Only appeared 13 times, so he didn't have much time to make an impact. But I know the Crystal Palace fans really raved about him at the time. But the one thing that's quite distinctive about him was he was a no-nonsense kind of central defender, got pace on him. He's very good at the aerial kind of challenges. And I think that sums up potentially a bit of his style and what he's going to bring to Besiktas. Obviously, what he's more known for during his playing career was his time in Germany. So he spent time at Werder Bremen, but also at Bayern Munich, which a lot of people seem to forget about. And I think that's possibly the mouldings of him, is that he got to see a different kind of style of football, for example, in Germany, got to experience the Bundesliga, and the philosophies of the Bundesliga definitely have rubbed off on him. So obviously went into retirement, but he spent a lot of time in Germany in terms of going through those development squads. So he spent time at Wolfsburg too, but also spent time at Nuremberg, for example, came back for a period of time at Wolfsburg before, I suppose, he started to become his own coach, and where he made a name for himself was with Lask, who are the Austrian side. At the time, wasn't a lot of expectations about him, and from there onwards, he started to build his reputation of kind of counter-attacking but direct football. And that's the thing that I would say kind of gear yourselves up for, is he's all about high intensity in terms of the press, making sure that those creative elements are able to be free to an extent, but in a structured manner, I suppose. And he, obviously, we were speaking offline about the formations, and he does like to mix it up a bit, which I suppose to a fan is nice to hear, because you're not stuck with plan A, for example.
Right. Yeah.
Might get to an extent where you might go, this is kind of predictable, we know this is going to happen, but at the same time, he is trying to think outside the box, and I don't think he is necessarily bad in terms of the style. I think this is the thing that I would definitely say, is that direct football, in terms of a footballing fan kind of perspective, is kind of seen like an antichrist, but actually there is a different way of playing football, right? And sometimes like the direct style of football gets you results, right? At the end of the day, if you're a Besiktas fan that has been crying out for results, then your man is here. Valérien Ismaël will develop those players. He will get you playing in a certain manner. And I think he just needs certain criteria to kind of build a team. Now, when he did go into Barnsley at the time, there was a bit of I suppose, question mark about what could he bring to Barnsley, because Barnsley were traditionally a side that struggles in the Championship, barely gets beyond sort of 17th, 18th in the league sometimes. One of the lowest budgets until Wickham made it that one season, and I got to see them play. And with Valérien Ismaël, you have to say he definitely had a good impact on Barnsley. His record really was, phenomenal. He took over Struber, who was obviously moved on to New York Red Bull. And he seemed to develop that team into an even more impactful side, because under Struber, they'd done really well, like phenomenally well, to even stay up in the Championship. But he kind of gave them a new emphasis in terms of platform, allowing players like Alfie Moet, who moved on with him to West Bromwich Albion. But then he brought in like players like Dike, who had a real big impact in terms of Barnsley's season, and they were so unlucky in terms of just missing out in the playoff matches, because I think teams didn't really like playing against Barnsley. This is the good thing about what Valérien Ismaël had installed into that team. It made it really hard for opposition to really guess, I suppose, to an extent, what they were going to expect. So again, from a Besiktas point of view, you want to kind of be like not predictable at times. That said, obviously, everyone's going to look at his record at West Bromwich Albion and go, yeah, that doesn't look too pretty. And how the hell has he come from English Championship to a prime Turkish side? So that's the main thing that I suppose a lot of people will have question marks. For me, I think you've got to look deeper beyond that. So when you look at stats going into that Christmas period, with Ismaël in charge, they had, for example, one of the best in terms of getting crosses into the box. They were very direct, had good possession stats, for example. They were quite tight at the back as well. So although they may have lost games, they were only by the odd goal here and there. What was lacking was at the other end. They really didn't have a striker. Ironically, in January, he brought in DK, and then within 40 minutes of his debut, he got injured. So that pretty much screwed him up, because by then, like, the fans were on his back. They didn't like his style of football by the end of it. They gave him time initially because, it's a huge rebuilding phase at West Bromwich Albion. They just got relegated from the Premier League. They had been mismanaged to an extent by previous managers. I think the board got it wrong initially by getting rid of Slaven Bilic. But let's put that to the side for a minute. Ismaël's been brought in, a huge sense of, I suppose, enthusiasm about what he could do, because they saw what he could do at Barnsley, and they said, well, he's done that at a fraction of our budget that we're giving him. So they thought, good things. And certainly for the first few matches that I did see West Bromwich Albion in the Championship, they were tearing teams apart. But the things that came out of West Bromwich Albion's fans' mouths was the fact that, do you know what? He's actually got us a plan B. He's got us a plan C. If something doesn't work, then he's trying something different. And that's something that they really appreciated. But ultimately, like I'm going to allude to, is that he needed a goal scorer, and that ultimately cost him the role. So I think there's a lot of positives to take out of it. Yes, there's probably things that he's probably learnt from that experience at West Bromwich Albion as well. But a lot of positives. I think he's a really up and coming, manager. He was talked about potentially as a Crystal Palace manager before Vieira got the role. And I think that kind of says a lot about him that, there was admirers from above in terms of, teams above his level. And I think he's got a good network. So it seems like, he's going to get some really hidden gems potentially. So even if he has got like a tight, like sort of budget, like at Barnsley, he can still bring in some decent players with him, attract them, get them playing in a certain style. And you never know, like Besiktas might be knocking on that door next season. So I think there's high hopes, definitely, from my point of view.
Yeah, no, that's all great. And I think the latter point you made about how he's sort of worked, I wouldn't say wonders, right? But he's done a lot with a little. And I think that's a key component of, like, historically Besiktas was a side that would overpay for older, kind of a retirement club type thing. And as the Turkish league's quality has evolved, generally, but the bigger clubs have been more impacted by, like, financial fair play and sort of decades of mismanagement and debt accumulation. They've had to become way more creative in how they approach the transfer windows. Far more focused on younger players, younger Turks from abroad, like especially from Germany. Yeah. There are a lot of German-born Turks, that they can kind of snipe. But then also, like especially Besiktas has done this, looking internally, developing kids in the academy. And it seemed like Ismail had shown maybe not like a proclivity, but certainly like he has something of a track record with working with young kids. He doesn't look at age as much as he looks at like work rate and fitness levels, right? Their ability to run a lot. It seems like that's something he puts a high value on.
Yeah.
Sort of along the lines of what you were saying in that regard too, and I guess we'll talk more about tactics now and formations, but like, I don't know if you've seen, but so the 5 substitute rule has come into effect, and now they're extending it out, right? Which we were talking about the crazy right before we started recording. We were talking about the crazy fixture levels and how how many games people are playing and how many more injuries. So I mean, that's a positive thing, generally speaking, I suppose, in that regard. But also, I was thinking about how certain managers, and I didn't mention this before we started. Certain managers could benefit more from that rule than others, and right, guys who play a more up-tempo, who demand more of their players, ask for them to run more, they could actually really stand to benefit from the sort of extension of the 5 sub rule. But so, like, with that said, anyway, that's not necessarily something for you to back up or not. But I mean, what more do you have to say regarding his tactics, formation and all that?
Yeah, if I just quickly allude to your last point then, it's interesting that you said that, because I can remember one game during the kind of COVID lockdown season in the UK, and what Ismail did very cleverly when the rule was there for 5 subs was he'd bring in like 2 players at half time just to kind of ensure the intensity was there. So from the very off, he'd ensure that the team was camped in the opposition's half. And there was one game where within, I think it was about 40 seconds of kickoff, they scored, which goes to show you, like, he has got the tactical brains that if there is the 5 sub rule, then he would definitely use it to his advantage. So let's talk about his tactics. So he does tend to favour a 3-4-3 formation, or a 3-5-2 formation, or a 5-3-2. So he does mix it up, I suppose, to an extent, depending on how he sees the game playing out. He tends to favour kind of a really just ensuring that the midfield is packed in, that they can retain possession quite quickly, and then get the wing backs or wingers potentially to really create those opportunities for the front men. He tends to obviously look at a very direct target man, so someone that's very strong, able to hold up the ball, but equally has pace on them, which is where DK was obviously brought in. But he had a player by the name of Carlton Morris at Barnsley, which very similar, maybe a bigger physique, but he certainly was one of those kind of battling rams, for example, that defenders didn't really like playing against. So again, he kind of traditionally goes for those kind of style of players up the top. But equally at the same time, he has nippy players that have got pace to burn, for example. So he had a winger at Barnsley called Callum Stars, for example, that did a really good job. Latterly, when he was at West Bromwich Albion, he had a very good right winger by the name of Darnell Furlong, for example, that would really just go from the bylines and just every time want the ball at his feet so he could ping in a ball into the box. So yeah, he does rely on those wingers to
Let
really
me step
create.
in real quick, because this is actually an interesting point that I think for Besiktas fans will be important. A lot of question has gone. So, you mentioned he likes to operate with those wing backs coming forward. And on the one hand, I think it concerned fans of Besiktas because, you could probably say that our best player this season, and it hasn't shown statistically because of a certain striker wasting a lot of opportunities. But Rashid Ghazal has been, really, he's been a delight for us for much of the year. He's been fun to watch. And so there's been some concern, what would Ismail's system do to his role as a right winger, especially with the wing back scenario. Now, last season they operated better when they were kind of, when our right back would do sort of these overlapping runs with Ghazal on the right side. So, certainly there's room for both of them to operate, and I think if Ismail is able to work with wingers too. I guess, this is promising. This is what we want to hear as Besiktas fans.
Yeah, no, definitely. I was going to say, I think he will get the best out of Gazelle in the sense of he might get him to learn a bit more of the defensive duties, perhaps, depending, I suppose, on the opponent. And this is the critical part. And I think this is the big thing to kind of say. He will utilize all the players that are at his disposals, but also the players that will buy into his philosophy. So that's the most important thing. I never heard about a story of him isolating a player because they didn't agree with him. Certainly he would rotate players, but never did I hear at Barnsley or West Bromwich Albion that they didn't like him as a coach or manager, for example. So I think this is the important thing to kind of say, is that he seems to get the players on board very early on. He kind of tries to embed them into what he wants them to achieve on the pitch. And I think, obviously, like I am trying to allude to, is he talks about having players that are creative on the wings to do their business in terms of, be the creative force within the team. However, having said that, at Barnsley, for example, and a player that he did bring to West Brom was Alfie Moet, who was kind of your driving force from the middle of the pitch. And what was interesting about Moet was he likes to have the ball at his feet. So I could see Pjanic, for example, potentially, if we were to use the current Besiktas squad, as being that pinnacle to kind of dictate the ball, dictate where it goes. And he likes that, someone that is creative in the middle of the park as well. They don't have to be battering rams in terms of tackling and getting in the blocks, for example, and, getting those second balls all of the time. But it is important to kind of stress out that, he will analyse against the opposition that he's facing and understand where the weaknesses are. He does use data a lot, but he doesn't always necessarily rely on that. He will anticipate what he can see on the pitch as well. So from my point of view, he's got an all-rounded approach. Certainly when I'm talking about 3-4-3, for example, then there is a bit more emphasis into that attacking pressure. So, even though 3-5-2 might seem like the ideal formation for that kind of approach, when you're seeing him line up as a 3-4-3, that's either him trying to chase a game, for example, or he's trying to impose himself. I saw it a few times in the Championship where he imposed himself in terms of ensuring that the ball was always in the opposition half. But the other thing, if we're talking the other side of the game, so defensively, you always can associate the sides being quite tight, very hard to beat, in terms of set plays, always, really safe. You didn't see too many goals being conceded from defensive set plays. If anything, it would be more open play goals, for example. So, that's got to be a slight positive. I appreciate it's never positive if they're conceding goals, right? But ultimately, if you're talking about a manager that's going to potentially instill a good philosophy, be strong at the back, but counter-attack or potentially attack when needed, I think the interesting thing will be the intensity part, because I appreciate the conditions in Turkey are slightly different to, say, UK, for example. So, it's a bit colder in UK. So how are those players going to cope in that kind of intensity, in that kind of condition? So it might be slightly different in the Turkish league. However, having said that, he'll make sure that the squad is super fit. And I think if there is anyone that is going to be, I suppose, lackluster in terms of performance, he'll drag them off. So I think he's not afraid to make those decisions equally. But I think the key thing to kind of allude to is he's going to utilise the players that is at his disposal and potentially build a really interesting squad. So I'll be really fascinated to see what kind of players he brings in as well, ultimately, because he's got an extensive network in abroad, primarily in Germany. As he alluded to, there may be a few Turks there as well that might want to escape back into Turkey as well. So that'd be very interesting to see kind of the hidden gems that he could maybe attract as well, because I think that's maybe some of the things that may elude some people's opinions of Ismaël, is they don't think maybe he's as shrewd in the transfer market, but certainly from what he brought to Barnsley, I don't think he got a fair chance at West Bromwich Albion. And I think over time he could build a really good squad at Besiktas.
Yeah, I mean, and I think he's in a position where he can probably request a couple key guys, and obviously it depends what we, with FFP, what we can offload as well. But I mean, already he's kind of drawn a line in the sand as far as asking for certain effort from guys. And so you've had quite a few guys buy in, and of course it's still the honeymoon period, right? But like you
exactly.
see the kind of guys with that reputation as warriors and whatnot who are obviously just 100% buying in. Our first result yesterday was a draw against Trabzonspor, who are like quite thoroughly ahead of everyone,
result.
And we were by far the better side, you could also say. So it was a very promising start, and already we saw a lot of the stuff you're talking about. Now, I guess the only question mark I have regarding tactics left over is, where do you see his teams? Do they need the ball a lot? Are they going to be holding the ball much, or are they going to be,
I think this is the fascinating thing about Ismaël, is they don't necessarily have to have the ball a lot. But he, I suppose, when it comes to the high intensity press, that's where they can really make teams suffer, because as soon as they've got the ball, then they are going to be in their face. But equally, they will retain the ball quite well. So I think it's a combination. Like I say, it depends on the side and where he sees the weaknesses to be. Sometimes he'll play it direct. Sometimes it's all about possession based to an extent. But they like to get the ball quickly to the offensive third, I suppose, is the right phrase to kind of say. So they won't necessarily kind of have Barcelona-esque tippy-tapper like style of football all of the time. But I think you're starting to see this kind of trend come into Europe anyway, because I don't know if you've seen maybe a bit of Barcelona and Xavi. I'm sure you reminisced about Galatasaray's result recently where they lost. But I'm starting to see a bit more of a directive style of football from Xavi, for example. And I'm starting to see that in general with football, where I suppose the tippy-tappy kind of style of football is nice on the eye, but actually directly when we're talking about results and what it can get you, it's not more than just pleasing on the eye, right? It's all about trying to win the match. And I think you're starting to see a ruthlessness come into the game. So, yeah, I suppose it goes back to Mourinho-esque style of football, right? But it's a bit more attractive on the eye, should we say. So I think there's a bit more intent, a bit more directness in terms of style. But, yeah, it's going to be very much, I feel like, what you'll get at Besiktas is I think there'll be a combination of get the ball to creative people, let them play 1-2s or potentially moves that will generate like maybe pressure for your opposition, and then you'll get your forwards that will do the pressing that will push the whole team up. Certainly, I think if you've seen a bit of maybe Inter Milan this season with Inzaghi, for example, you've almost got the three centre-backs playing into midfielders. So they're kind of really doing the midfielders' role, and then you've got the midfielders doing the supporting role for the attackers. So you're almost kind kind of maybe seeing that mimic. And I've saw it ironically at the last Euro, should I say, where a lot of teams were playing three centre-backs, but they were ball-playing centre-backs, for example. So I think you'll get very kind of similar ethos with Ismaël. And maybe that might be the best way. I don't know if that's good news for Besiktas fans, but certainly I think that's the one thing I would say is that he will try and play to win games in an attractive manner at times as well.
That's great. No, I mean, and what's especially heartening for a lot of us is just seeing the three defenders back there and that we're less prone to sort of gaffes on the counter, right? It's been, I think, like a decade almost of like all the right pieces being there, but still, you know, you have like that one sort of weak link on the back line, and because of that, you just get hit on the counter. That all it takes is that one chance, you know. If you can't build up a good solid lead, and then bam, like the game's ripped it wide open, and you know, then like the emotion comes into it, and you have the guys, you know. So like, it's already, we saw yesterday the benefit of having the three guys back. You know, where if one guy slips up, you have another guy to come back and cover for him, right? It's been pivotal, even in the one match, because Trabzon is a really dangerous side in that regard. And their only goal wasn't on a counter; it was sort of, I mean, it was a weird play. Honestly, it was like it was a bit of weak defending by Vida, but to like kind of corroborate what you've already said too, our goal was. It was our right back, so, you know, speaking of the wing back action you mentioned, getting hooked up by Ghazal on the right side. So, you know, that, you know, the guy with the ability, with the nice 1-2 pass, finding Rosier sort of flanking him on the wing and cutting in and making a nice move and scoring. So everything you've talked about, right, like giving creative players the freedom to sort of make that move, and then as well like incorporating the wing backs and having them come forward, and all of that happened on the one
That's
play.
Good. So. That's good to hear. I mean, I didn't even allude to transitions of play, but that is essentially what he'll do, is transitioning from that attacking base to a defensive base to potentially a bit of both, for example. So I think that's what you'll see a lot of with Ismaël. He'll learn or try and establish that kind of style where when you don't have the ball, what do you do as a team, not just as an individual? But importantly, when you do attack, the methods of how you attack. And I suppose more, and this is the thing that I'm starting to appreciate a bit more from a coaching point of view, is how do you get the individuals to think for themselves? So, you know, right, there's one thing to kind of say we're playing this way, but how do you instinctively get those players to play in that manner? So how do you make sure that they get the right passes or the right kind of attacks taking place, or maybe potentially holding a line, for example? Because I think that's the hard part. Like you probably played football like me. Like it is very hard to get four of your teammates to just be in a straight line at times. So you know, it is, you know, it's easier said than done, right? But
I'm the guy in the adult league. I'm the guy in the adult league who has to go back because I get so frustrated by the lack of like concentration and defense and like focus on it. It's like, guys, we still have to stop. Like everybody wants to go forward and like show their flashy little cross, you know, whatever it is. And it's like, come on, folks, like we've got to defend. So no, I fully back what you're saying. No, I mean, it all sounds quite promising. I think, you know, for Besiktas fans, from his lineage, right? Like, you know, the stuff that's fed into his ethos as a manager, to his track record, you know, and like in a lot of ways, right, lacking a striker has been what's plagued us this year. But that's also, I think, right, like we all knew going into next season that was a need. So having him at the helm going into the window where he can kind of request a certain type of striker or whatever it might be, if not the striker himself. I don't know. The problem with DK is that he's now moved around so many times that I don't know if he'd be a cheap, right? He'd still probably cost like 8 million euro or something. I mean, I think his last move
they're
was
asking
15.
for something like that, aren't they? Yeah. I heard quotes when he was at Barnsley that they wanted 20 million. They were just trying to cash in on the fact that there was some Premier League clubs sniffing around his services. So, I think that was a bit ambitious. But I think the fee that was agreed with West Brom at the time was 5 million plus like add-ons essentially. So it might not be a bad deal because DK and obviously Ismaël have history. They know each other quite well. They know what they can get out of each other. Equally, like you say, do you think there's potentially some better players out there? There will be a hell of a lot of players out of contract this summer potentially. So is that necessarily the best kind of move? I don't know. And if you are saying that potentially Beşiktaş might be tight in terms of their budget, then I think, potentially Ismaël will have to go into its kind of scouts and potentially his recruitment teams and delve into it a bit more. But there will be plenty of bargains out there. It's just a question of who can fit his ethos and who are the right types of players. And I suspect there'll be quite a few there that will be wanting to play for a club like Beşiktaş. So no doubts about it. I think Ismaël is definitely the right man to build that team back up. Definitely.
No, and we've had a track record of North American strikers, right? We have Kyle Larin, the Canadian, right, who are physically very formidable, but technically lacking a little bit. I think our fans are a little weary of, like, he had a fantastic season last year. This season he's come out quite cold for his club, although for his national side, Canada's doing quite well, right?
Very well.
But so, I wouldn't be surprised if they were real careful about not only being really thorough in finding the right striker at the right age, right, with the right sort of profile to fit what Ismaël wants, but then additionally adding depth. We've been hurt by over relying on the one, right, in the same way that Ismaël's last gig was ruined by him over relying on the one striker who wasn't healthy, and then the whole season being derailed. That's been like last season. We almost lost the title because our striker Abubakar got injured late, and then we couldn't quite maintain that pressure on opposition's goal that we had all season, and so it became tight. So I think we're learning lessons from our own experiences, and perhaps Ismaël's history as well would feed into this. I think we'll have a couple good strikers going into next season, hopefully, which would benefit both sides. But thank you so much, Adam.
No worries.
For all the info. Everyone obviously check out Adam at the Hopeless Wanderer podcast. Do you have anything to plug? I mean, give us your at, your
thank you. You can check us out on Twitter at Hopeless Pod or on Instagram at the Hopeless Wanderer Podcast. We generally kind of go live on a Thursday night in the UK at around 8 p.m. So GMT +1 essentially in terms of time zone. But we are live across all major platforms on a Friday anyway, so you can obviously listen to us at any time. So it's myself, my co-host Andy, who's a big Man United fan and always whinging about their efforts, and then we've also got my other co-host Craig, who is a Glasgow Rangers fan. So we've got a very broad kind of depth of knowledge, I suppose, between the three of us. Generally we talk about European football, big stories, but then also about mainly the Premier League, Serie A, and a bit of Bundesliga at times when it becomes less predictable, right? Apart from that, it's all good fun. So feel free to chip in with your questions anytime, and we'll be glad to take any of those questions on board. So, and we'll discuss them more importantly. So, thank you, Sinan. It's been a pleasure to be on your pod as well.
Oh, always. Anytime. And I'm sure we'll have cause to bring you back on. I'm glad we finally got to do the return leg here.
That's it, yeah.
and please do tell Andy that as much as I wish that he'd been wrong about Batshuayi, unfortunately he was pretty much dead on. Mention, I suppose, that there were some redeeming, silver lining, wonder strikes in there that
I'll try and find Batshuayi's greatest hits, right?
There you go.
We can just kind of calm it down a bit, but we'll say you were right, Andy, but just not on these goals, right?
Yeah, exactly. Show him a highlight reel and be like, but on the other hand, apparently their fans kind of hate him, and you were sort of right. I know you don't want to give his ego too much of a stroke there, but
exactly.
Anyway, thank you so much. It was great to have you on, Adam, and we'll see you around.
Will do. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Excellent work. Thank you so much, Adam. Again, follow him on Twitter. Put that information in our tweets and whatnot. Follow him on Instagram, etc., etc., etc. Thank you so much, Adam, for that great preview. I will leave you off now, finally, with where we are in the table going into match day 32. Trabzon, of course, still in first place with 71 points. Second place, Konyaspor with 58 points. Third place, Fenerbahce with 56. They're now 2 points behind Konyaspor in second place. Alanyaspor, 52 points. Başakşehir, just out of Europe, with 50 points. We are playing Alanyaspor, by the way, next. Fourth place, Alanyaspor. Adana Demir, 49 points in 6th place. Hatay, 48 points in 7th. And then good old Beşiktaş in 8th place, staying in the same position, in fact, with 47 points. Yikes, huh? Right behind us, Antalya with 44 points. Fatih Karagümrük with 43. Kasımpaşa, Sivas, and Galatasaray, all with 41. So they remain 6 points back on us, despite all the points we're dropping. But so yeah, we're in 8th place. With that said, one win gives us 50 points. 50 points is where Başakşehir is in 5th place. We're still only, you could say only, I guess, 9 points back from Fenerbahce in 3rd. It's not particularly realistic that we can catch them, perhaps, with only 7 matches to go. However, we're only 5 points back on 4th place, Alanyaspor. 4th place is, of course, a Conference League place now. So we could still go to Europe. We're not out of the running yet, by any stretch. We absolutely should be playing for that. We've got a great new coach. Already got us playing pretty well. Now you know everything there is to know about him. Thank you one more time, Adam. And to all of you folks out there, thanks for tuning in. We will be back next week as per usual to talk about Beşiktaş against Alanyaspor. Beşiktaş is hosting Alanya, for anyone who doesn't know, on Saturday, April 9th, here in New York City. That is at 1:30 p.m. Kind of a late start. Check your local listings as per usual. I will see you around, folks. Follow us on Twitter at Eagles_podcast. Follow us on Instagram, Black Eagles Podcast, one word. Follow myself at Sir_Writes_a lot. Let's go, Beşiktaş! Come on! We can do this! We can still get third! F you, Fena. We're coming for you. Peace out, everyone. See you around next week.
Çok harikasın, çok güzelsin. Harika, harika, harika.
Beşiktaş International hopes you enjoyed this program.